To be or not to be, that is the question.
What you just saw is what we will recreate step by step in this video tutorial. I'm going to start off with a small background scene that I make with assets from Polyhaven. All of these assets are completely free. You can render them and even sell the renders, but you just can't sell on the models. First, I'm going to need the background lighting from an HDRI. Simple way to add a lot of high definition shadows and other highlights. And to add a base for the model to stand on, I'm going to get a PBR texture, which will include extra data like a normal map, besides just the color map. Add a chair model to give some sense of scale to the scene. We can use all these assets inside of Blender, which lets us make 3D images, animations, and just about anything else you can imagine. For this video tutorial, I'll use Blender 3.1. The HDRI can be input into the scene as a background texture, environment texture. Let's check out that HDRI. We can see there's going to be some lighting coming from the floor, and the ceiling is the brightest, so we'll add an extra light source for that. The extra light source will help to make the Eevee scene a lot more realistic looking. Once the light is switched over to a sun type, the direction becomes a little bit more obvious, and we can adjust that to a default so it looks just straight down. Our light source is the lights from the ceiling. The sun's angle value is its angular diameter, or how big it looks from the ground. If this angle is large, then it will take up most of the sky. If it's very, very small, it would be like having a very, very tiny sun in the sky. A basic plane is good enough for the floor, just one polygon, quick to render. And that's kind of the point of this default scene. It takes a little while to set up, but once we've done that, we can use it for many different models and test them out in a variety of different poses just to see what looks right. But the rest of the video, we're going to be using add-ons. So let's just start with the most useful one, Node Wrangler. It helps us perform a variety of operations in the shader very quickly. This add-on comes built in with Blender, so we just have to enable it. Using Node Wrangler, there's a shortcut where we just select the principled shader and press Ctrl-Alt-T, and that will let us hook up all our PBR textures so that our plane will use all the PBR texture data to recreate the color, normal map, shininess, specular, etc. By using the append from file operation, I can pull just the chair out of the files I extracted from the zip file from Polyhaven for the model chair. The chair looks nice already, but we're going to need a bit of a bigger space to lay it out on. And I'd also like more than just one chair. I'll make it sort of the size of a standard room, about 6 meters wide and 4 meters deep, at least big enough to get some idea of the scale. The floor mesh has been scaled up, and the texture has been stretched to accommodate, so we need to tile the texture to unstretch it, with the same dimensions as we gave to the mesh. It is possible to see some shadowing underneath our chair, but it's not quite enough for this scene. I'm going to change the world shader, which is our background environment shader, add an input light path, which lets me tell the difference between what is getting light from the HDRI background and where the HDRI background is seen directly by the camera. Seems a little bit counterintuitive, but using a mix shader, we're going to mix 2 copies of the background shader. One of them will be controlling the light on the objects in the scene, and one will control the pixels of the HDRI directly visible by the camera. I'll show what it looks like with a variety of values and how it affects the lighting in the foreground and the background. In this scene, I give only a quarter of the HDRI light to the foreground objects. Shadows are starting to look better, but they still look less than accurate, especially where the legs would normally connect with the floor. Before I do more work on the shadows, I think I'll just move the chair around a bit and make a duplicate. I press Alt-D so it's a linked duplicate and it uses less data. In the Render Properties panel, I can see that the render engine is Eevee, and I'll need to set some of the things custom, like screen space refraction, which will be used later for the transparencies like eyes. The size of these maps will determine the amount of detail we see in the shadows. Soft Shadows works with the sun angular diameter to make the shadows appear to come from multiple directions to soften them. Add high quality normals to round things out. With color management, I'll change the contrast to be a bit higher to make things pop a bit more. The scene's finished, we can save it out and use it a bunch later. The MakeHuman community website has a download that will let us, for free, create any human-like character, add textures, bunch of clothes, armature, all sorts of extra stuff. It's amazing. I'll be using the most recent release, which is version 1.2.0. I have to click on a specific page to get to the plugins area. And these are some plugins that come default with MakeHuman. Get the add-on for Blender. This will let us connect MakeHuman, the app, directly to Blender, the app, by way of sockets. There's a download for the MHX importer here, but it's broken as of version 3.1. With MakeHuman, the Python app started, I'll make a character quick and then save them out and export them. To show as much as possible, I'll try to add geometry for all of the different parts. Topology can be important because a low poly topology can leave out the toes and sometimes even the finger detail. Female generic gives a relatively high quality mesh. The armature is important. We'll go with the maximum number of details. Let's take a final look at the character before we save out. We're going to be exporting the character later. It's a good idea to at least save the file so we can get back to the exact settings in case we find some small detail needs to be fixed. Exporting will give us a file that we can read into Blender. A binary file, so it's a small file size. Meter units, so that it's the correct human scale. It is a bit slow to export that MHX file, but totally worth it. Back over to Blender. I'll start a new collection to keep things separate. The first way to get our MakeHuman character into Blender is the fast way. It's using the sockets method, which is with the MakeHuman community add-on that I've downloaded already. I go to Edit, Preferences, and install the add-on, and then enable the add-on. I've already got it installed, so I just enable it. In the 3D view, the Tools menu, I'll go to the MakeHuman tab, and I can use the Import Human button to directly connect to the MakeHuman Python app and pull in the character. To get MakeHuman the app to connect to Blender, I have to go back to MakeHuman, go to the Community tab and the Socket panel. It's ready to accept connections. Now I can hit the Import Human button to get the character that's currently showing in MakeHuman. And there you go. A few tweaks are needed though to make things look right. But we'll do a quick overview from toe to head to make sure that all the details that we wanted are in this import. Switching over to a rendered view, we see that some of the textures are weird. It seems like we just need to change some of the settings on the material or the screen space refraction However, it seems to be solved simply by clicking on the UV map. Perhaps it wasn't activated. And I'll do this for the clothes as well, because they do look a little bit strange now that I notice it. Our character also has this problem with the eyebrows and eyelashes, but I'll fix that later. With some of the materials fixed up, I want to take a look at the armature on the character and see that it works correctly, and see if we can get some inverse kinematics going for easier animation. MakeHuman is a work in progress, and the inverse kinematics rig, although it looks a little funny, works very well. It just needs a little tweak to look better at the start. Looking at the object data properties for the armature, I can change the display type to octahedral for a bit more traditional look. Moving around the knee bone shows off how some of the fine controls can be affected by IK. And when we go to the foot, it lets us do some more gross controls. But even with that, there can be very fine controls as to which way the foot is pointing, and with the default skeleton, we even get the ability to control toe movements. The hands can be moved around, and it will cause the elbows to move as well. Those IK controllers for the elbows will then be used for the specific positioning. I'll change the armature layout so it looks like a bit more of a dramatic, but maybe realistic pose. To get a better understanding of how this will look in a scene, I need to bring back some more of the geometry. Even though it costs render times, it's a minimum set, so it won't cost much. As a first test in Eevee, this is passable. It's gonna look a lot better later, and when it's moved into cycles, it will look a whole lot better. If we can get the Eevee settings right, we can get it to closely approximate cycles, and we get a really quick way to test out what our model will look like, especially if it's animated, because animation and rendering soak up time. The hair is easy to fix. In fact, most of it can be fixed quickly with a change of specular and roughness. In a later video, I'll go over more details on skin shaders, but for now we'll use the default. And of course, save it so we have a copy in case for later. Looking up close at the face rig, we can see that there are a lot of fine detail bones, and they do control everything, from the position and movement of the eyes to the mouth and so on. There is no face panel to give us an automatic control over some of these details. To get the automatic controls and setup for some of the face, I'm going to use an MHX importer that originally came from the MakeHuman community website, but it's been altered by someone else, then I altered it myself to update it to work with version 3.1 of Blender. The next add-on is one I've created completely from scratch to try and make the process of getting MakeHuman models into Blender as precise as possible and as quick as possible. The latest release is version 1.3.5. With the release zip file, there are two script files that are used to quickly move the armatures into place for retargeting animation data. That scene file is becoming very useful. I'm going to reload it again, and then get it ready to pull in the next MakeHuman character import. With the add-on I downloaded, I would install it, but mine's already installed, so I'll just enable it. With the add-on enabled, there's two different ways to import the character. We can go through the File, Import, menu, or we can go through the 3D view, tools, and Import MHX panel. In this panel, which look the same either way, we're going to change some of the operator settings to give us more control. We only need one of the things that gets imported, proxy. That relates to the topology that we chose earlier. Female generic. Face shape lets us have a visime panel so that we can make the mouth move to match text. The face panel lets us automatically control some of the other mouth movements and face movement. And the rig type needs to be MHX. This is what the eyelid movement and some of the other rig stuff in the AMHTB add-on is built around. I forgot to do it here, but I should enable subdivision surface so it will automatically add the modifier to all the imported meshes. I'll have to do that manually later. It's a good idea to save the presets so that we can fix them up if something went wrong. If we don't save, then we might repeat the same mistake. And it will take some time to import, but I've sped it up for this video. The imported characters armature starts in pose mode, so I need to press Control Tab to exit pose mode right away. I want to take a quick look at the rendered view to see if everything came in okay. The UV maps look fine on this. They didn't suffer the same problem as the other way to import the human character. Some more geometry and lighting in the scene will make this look a little bit better. It's always a good idea to do a quick once-over to make sure that all of the basic details at least were imported correctly. The hair looks like a shiny helmet, so I'm gonna fix that one up real quick. Reduce the specular a huge amount, it's all good. Things are looking generally good. It's worth saving the file after having to wait so long to do the import. The other method of importing is a lot faster, although sometimes it doesn't have the same details or it's missing the skeletal details. We can swap out between them sometime. If we hide some of the bones we don't need for the face and really just focus on the face panel and hide everything else with Shift H. With it set up so that we can see the face and the face panel and also our Import MHX panel easily, we can go to the visimes part of the Import MHX so that we can automatically move the mouth into the shape of letters. I'll show quickly how we can make the face move. There's also an ability within this Import MHX add-on to automatically convert a Moho file into the face movements. This is a bit prone to error and a little bit difficult to set up the file. There is a free app to help create the file called Papagayo. The one picture on the information page pretty much shows you exactly how to do it. You type in the text, you have an audio file, and you stretch pieces of text out to match the different parts of the audio file. Then export it and it will have the framed face animation. The Load Moho button is what would load the file that gets exported from Papagayo. I'll probably demonstrate this app in a later video. After adding the first keyframe, I can't make any changes to the face via the visime panel until I turn automatic keyframing back on. When using the visime panel, it's important to pay attention to whether or not automatic keyframing is turned on. I'll do a quick demonstration by adding a few keyframes randomly. I need to remember to turn off auto keyframing when I'm done with this part. The mouth movements might seem exaggerated now, but they can be fixed easily later with a graph editor. With the visimes panel, there's no button to reset everything back to 0, so I'll select all of the bones and press Alt-G to remove all the location data. Since automatic keyframing is on, it will also add a keyframe at the same time. The AMHTB add-on has a quick way to add some movement to the eyelids and add a blink track. In pose mode, I'll press Alt-H to show all the bones again. And find the gaze bone, which determines where the eyes will look. Very useful for quickly adding movement to the eyes. I've added lid look to the character, so I'll show what happens. It looks like the eyelids move up and down a little bit as the character's gaze moves up and down. This isn't noticeable from a distance, but it's very obvious up close. And just for reference, this is what it would look like without the lid look. And then I'll put lid look back on. Before adding the blink track, we needed to add lid look because the blink track will keyframe some parts of the lid look. Research has shown that people blink on average 10 times per minute. To make it more interesting, I'll set it to 20 blinks per minute. Good, everything seems to be working. Now I can close down MakeHuman because I don't need that for exports anymore. To get more variety of voices, besides my own, for characters, I'm going to use some free resources available online. The first resource, which I'm just mentioning but I won't use, is MaryTTS, which is difficult to set up, so I'm just going to use a website. The IBM Watson text-to-speech demo website. Something simple should suffice. The voices sound good, there's a variety. However, for free I can only get 10,000 words per month. I've looked up some of the details.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
But how are we going to get these sounds recorded or at least put into our production somehow? The solution is another free one. It's OBS Studio, something I'm using to record this video right now. With the correct audio input or output capture, we can get the sound that's coming from the website.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
For example, if I output as an MKV file, then I would have to open it in another free software called Shotcut, then export the audio as a WAV file, and then I can use that now to sync up with the mouth movements of our Blender character, the MakeHuman character. Shotcut gives us a simple way to take anything that comes out of OBS Studio and separate the audio and video. And we can examine both frame by frame. We can scrub through the WAV file to find out how the mouth should sound and estimate how it should move with the Visine panel on a frame-by-frame basis. The height of the lighter blue bars on the darker blue background shows the volume level at each frame. Ideally, I'd be doing this on 2 screens, but I'll share one screen and have Shotcut on the right half and Blender on the left half while doing the mouth work. I didn't quite record the next part sound properly, so there might be a bit of an echo on the character's voice.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
The way it's set up now, each frame in Shotcut equals 1 frame in Blender. I'll do a bit of positioning of things to get it set up just right. At the beginning, I need to reset the location values and have a 0 keyframe. I'll go through a few frames at a time of the WAV file and then transfer that over to the blend file. By using my own face, moving my lips to match what the sound is like, and then looking in a mirror and putting that onto the Blender character. It takes a bit of practice to get going, but once I get going, it's really easy to get in a groove. For each frame, I can play around a lot and even come back to it and change it later. But I need to leave a gap of 1 empty frame between keyframes so that there's some blending between the face movements. I'm not too worried if it doesn't look exact at first. When all of this is played in quick succession, it looks a bit more natural. By the way, so that I know that I'm getting the right frame in Shotcut matched up with the right frame in Blender, I look first in Shotcut on the very far right side and about the middle. For example, it says frame number 12, and on the left side, I'm in Blender on about frame 12. I'm going to speed up through the rest of this. It's kind of boring, and it's basically the same thing as what I've done already. Just look at the character's face and think about the sound and if it matches how it looks on your face when you say that sound. I'll just save the file for use later. Have Blender play through the frames while I play through Shotcut to try and match up the sound and the images.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
For a test to see if all of this work paid off, I need to set up the camera so that it's looking at the face close up and then render off the frames and try and match things up in Shotcut and export it as a file. But first I should remember to do a tweak to the jaw so that it looks a bit more natural, so the movement isn't so extreme. Go to the Armature's face panel, select the bone that I know to be for the jaw, and then go over to the graph editor. Here I can see all the keyframes, so after I select all, I'll press the home key, which shows me all of them, and then scale on the y-axis by half, making sure that I'm using the 2D cursor center instead of the center of the keyframe. This way I'm going to be scaling in reference to 0 instead of in reference to the average. Let's animate again to see how it looks. Everything's set. I just need to render the animation. After rendering, I need to bring them into Shotcut. First, I create a video track. With the playlist showing, I can go to my folder that has the frames, the rendered frames in it, drag the first frame into the playlist, preview that frame in the viewer, and then set its properties so that it's going to be an image sequence. Shotcut will automatically reload the sequence for me. I can put it onto the timeline as a video sequence. To adjust how I view the timeline, I'm going to press Shift and use the mouse scroll down and up to try and zoom things in and out. It's good to print out a reference of the shortcut keys.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
It looks like it's synchronized well. Just to check, I'm going to go up to the settings for the video mode and see that it's on the same frames per second as I expect to be in Blender. 30 frames per second on both.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
Even though Blender's currently set to 24, I'm treating it as if it's 30. which works because currently we don't have any physics simulation. The final step in Shotcut to make the video with the audio attached to it is to export file. Shotcut is nice because it comes with a lot of presets, like the YouTube preset for the codecs and so on. Just use the defaults and it'll work out fine. The advanced menu can be helpful though. The exported file can be viewed on our computer, or we can upload it to YouTube and spread it to the masses. Thank you very much. Please like and subscribe if you do like and subscribe.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
Also, we should see how this looks in cycles.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
And it does look a lot nicer. Thanks again.